divisions and many of its chapters for sponsoring the breakfast this morning prior to our session to honor Bob. Indeed, it's an honor to chair the 2002 showcase session. When you speak about a distinguished person who you've grown up with as a professional colleague, one that you've shared experiences with as an administrator in special ed, and one who has become a very, very close friend. It was indeed an honor that Bob asked me to be here to chair the showcase session this morning. Why did we choose Bob Abbott for this showcase session? Knowledgeable in all areas. He speaks on learning disabilities, reading disabilities, early childhood, bilingual, special education law, special processes. Practical approach. Whenever I've heard Bob speak, he always gives the audience something to go away with the next day that they can use in their classrooms or their administrative responsibilities. But you know what? He always amazes me because when he tells you about that practical approach, he turns around and then cites research out of a very recent journal. And I think to myself, my gosh, how could he possibly read all of that to document what he's presenting? So he's truly an amazing individual. His presentation style, clear, concise, uses examples, and is always open to questions from the audience. Willingness to work. I have never, ever heard Bob Abbott say no when someone has asked him to be an officer, to be a chair, but most importantly, just to help them as a member or a worker in the organization. Modesty. Everybody honors Bob, but Bob always stands back and says, oh, it was nothing, it was nothing. I've even seen him blush a few times. He has service at all levels in organizations, presidents, chairs of committees, chairs of task forces. Whatever Bob takes on, he'll go through to completion. Leadership. How many of us look at organizations and say, look what Bob Abbott did for that group? Mentoring. If I look out in this audience, I see lots and lots of people there that have been touched in some way by Bob, including myself. Personable. In all the years that I've known Bob, and I guess we're showing kind of our longevity over 30 years, I have never heard someone say that Bob didn't fulfill a job, that he was not reliable, that he didn't complete exactly what he was going to say when he said it. People may disagree with him, but they always have great respect for the fact that he speaks his mind, he has background, and he does it, though, in a non-critical, negative way, and that's so important. He also amazes me because he works with so many different groups. Parents, staff, peers, administrators, the community. He treats them all equally and designs his message to that particular group. So, I guess that's why we're honoring Mr. ICEC, Robert Abbott, Mr. Abbott, Bob, REA, today. From my viewpoint, I've known Bob, as I said, for well on 30 years. He mentored me in CEC. I was active in a local chapter, and he encouraged me to come aboard the ICEC board. And I grew in ICEC because of Bob's initial contact with me. And then a scary thing happened in Illinois. We started a new committee called the Professional Standards and Practices Committee, kind of modeled after the CEC one. And Bob chaired that, the very first one. And we were making our impact on the Illinois State Board at that time. Illinois Federation had never been asked by the State Board to do much. And now we were being asked to give presentations, to be on committees. And the job of this particular committee was to write papers and present them to legislative subcommittees, to the State Board, to all these different things. Bob chaired the committee first. And then guess who chaired it? Me. And I said, oh my gosh, how possibly could I write these things and deliver them the way that Bob did? And I kind of shared that with Bob, and he gave me encouragement, and then he said, besides, he said, you know, I'll help you, and he did. Every time I asked for input, Bob was the one who always provided it. In Illinois, too, I was a superintendent of an intermediate unit, and when things came out from the federal government or the state asked us to do something or there was a court case and I didn't know how we would respond, I'd call Bob and I'd say, Bob, this is what I'm thinking of, or Bob, what are you doing? And if Bob said he was on that track too, I knew darn well I was right and I moved on. I've done a lot of in-service presentations with Bob, and he always made me look good, always. His ease with working with parents always amazed me. When I took over the job in Illinois, our particular intermediate unit didn't really have a very good reputation. And so one of the jobs that my board gave me when they hired me was, within 3 years, get the act on the road or else, so we did. And one of the things that we hadn't been doing very well was to work with parents. And so my idea was to have a parent in service, a speaker that would kick off the session, and then during the year, what we would do is to have work groups in the evening and on Saturdays so parents can come back and do those things. I asked Bob to be that first speaker. I knew if anybody could kick off a parent in service and to make parents believe in public education and in special ed, Bob could do it. And he did. And he came to a very diverse group, and gave a message to each of those parents. And I think probably the biggest honor that probably could be bestowed upon was my board president, who was highly critical. And he came up to me at the end of the presentation and he said, you know, that man is a mighty fine individual. He also had many, many skills working with legislators, and I remember very, very well many of his testimonies that I sat in the audience with, listening to him work with legislators and trying to make them understand exactly what this law was and how it was going to affect the children that he was working with. I'm honored, as I said, to share this because Bob is indeed a respected professional partner, a CEC colleague, and as I said, most importantly, a very, very close friend. Where did Bob begin? Bob grew up in Illinois, in central Illinois, near Bloomington. He had his high school education in Bloomington and received his bachelor's degree in special education and library science in Illinois State University. His master's was in administration and supervision, but he waited 8 years. He got some teaching under his belt and went on then and got his master's in administration and supervision. He also has an advanced certificate from Indiana University and many, 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 many courses, including a study at the Piaget Institute in Switzerland. His career, he began as a special ed teacher in Springfield. And then he became the very first teacher in the McLean County Special Ed Association. And for some of the people in the audience, I wish some of the younger staff were here. He started out with 18 students, very diversified group, no aid, no extra help, and no materials. Then he moved northward, and he went to Waukegan, Illinois, to be a teacher of multiple handicapped students, on to be a consultant in special ed, head of the materials center there, special ed supervisor, assistant director, and he retired as the associate superintendent of schools for the Waukegan District 60, in charge of special services. He was also, during this time, for 25 years, an adjunct professor at many universities in Illinois. I think there were 5 or 6 that he actually taught at. Organizations. Past president of the Illinois Federation, the Illinois Division for Early Childhood, the Illinois Division for Learning Disabilities, Illinois Pioneers Division, DLD, 3 local chapters, the Lake County Learning Disabilities Association, and the International Association for Study of Perception. At CEC, he was one of the governor-at-large, U.S. He was the Illinois governor to the Board of Governors. He chaired the governance committee and actually started one of the restructuring movements in Illinois. I chaired that committee last year and 3 years before that, and it was a lot of Bob's material that we used as we looked over things because he and his committee had done such a thorough job in looking at governance in CEC. He was a member of 8 standing committees here at CEC, and as I said, chaired the governance and the history committee, and he attended CEC conventions every year except one since 1961. In Illinois, he was the president of the Federation, governor, regional director, treasurer, historian, parliamentarian, and he chaired and served on every single committee that ever existed in Illinois. And in Illinois, we have lots of committees that come about. Committees within that organization. His whole life is in special education. He's also the secretary of the Waukegan Jack Benny Statue Association and Honors Advisory Board. He's the secretary for 28 years of the Little Fort Lions of Waukegan. And do you know what? He was supposed to go on a trip with my husband and I, he and Mr. Vickers, and couldn't because he was sponsoring a Christmas program for the Lions. And even though everything was well organized and laid out, he said, "These are my children, and I have to stay." We missed him, but we knew why. He's also active in the Retired Teachers Association, the Waukegan Historical Society, and a special interest of mine, too, the Route 66 Association. So you can see Bob is really, really diversified in his various interests. Honors, there are so many, and so distinguished. And I think you'll see that when I tell you about his honors, almost every organization that he's belonged to has honored him in some way. And I think that's a tribute that very, very few people can talk about. A middle school in Waukegan was named after Bob, Robert E. Abbott Middle School, upon his retirement. He was presented the Learning Disability Association Presidential Award. He received the ICEC Meritorious Award and is well known in Illinois and really a lot of other places too as Mr. ICEC. He received the Illinois State Outstanding Alumni Award, the Illinois State Board of Education Those Who Excel in Administration Award. He was the Outstanding CEC Contributor, one of the very first to receive the award, Outstanding Contributor Award in DLD, the Learning Disabilities Association of Illinois Leadership Award, and the Outstanding Administration Award, Lake County Mental Health Award, the Waukegan Outstanding Citizen Award, received the Excellence in Award in Service from the Waukegan Public Schools, and the Red Kerrison Humanitarian Award from the Lions. So you see that indeed every organization knew his worth and chose to honor him in some way. And now he's been retired for 6 years. He enjoys traveling. He takes a few whirls on the gambling boats. He loves his family and is very involved with his nieces and nephews, and he's highly interested in genealogy. He's done a very, and you know Bob, done a very, very thorough analysis of his family. He's secretary of 2 organizations, treasurer of 4, member of 2 professional advisory boards in learning disabilities, the first vice president of Illinois LDA, and the history historian of 3 organizations. Retired. He's the Energizer Bunny. We now have some individuals that would like to share with you some of their own perspectives about Bob, his work, his attitude, his personality, his characteristics. Bob is a very, very, very involved family member. And the lady that I'm going to introduce, this is the first time I've met her personally. I feel that I know Linda, though, because Bob speaks of her and her family, Darren and Dana, the niece and nephew, so often. So I kind of feel I've grown up with them from they've been little to now adults having families of their own. Bob was committed to his family since the very beginning. Eugene and Ernestine, his mother and father, often invited the children from his class over to their own home, so that Bob actually brought his classroom family into his home to share the family aspect. Bob and I both lost our mom just a few weeks apart in December, and I know that Alice and Ernestine are here. Bob gave a lot of support and leadership to Linda, his sister, because she has a daughter who's deaf. Even though Dana was educated in the system where we have free and open public education, and it's supposed to be appropriate. Bob worked with Dana almost day and night, it seemed, going over one step after another of problems that Linda encountered in trying to have her daughter appropriately educated. I'd like to introduce the family member that's here today to tell us a little bit about growing up with Bob from a family perspective. Linda Flick, Bob's sister,
a speaker like my brother, so you have to bear with me. And I may get a little emotional when I do this, so understand. It's a pleasure and honor to be standing before you today, to have the opportunity to be able to talk about my two favorite things in my life, my brother and my daughter. In the 53 years of my life, my big brother has always been a very important part. As for the other three siblings in our family of 5, he has also influenced their lives, but I think I have the record. As you can see, we did share the gene pool. Somewhat, still red hair. And most say that we resemble one another. But unfortunately for me, the pool ends here. I think all of us children were very intelligent children, but Bob excelled at it. If he received an A-, he would be terribly upset and ask the teacher what he could do to improve. He had straight A's all through college and school before that. If he told you he would do something, he would. What he does in the public life, he does the same thing with his family. He never lets you down. He's one of our family members who nothing gets done or accomplished until Bob's been consulted. We have to have his opinion first. With all of this in mind, you can understand why, when there is a problem, he gets called. Please let me share my personal challenge that he has been working with since 1980 with the initial phone call I made to him. I'd like to share a speech that, with Bob's help, I was able to give to several organizations in my hometown in Lancaster, Ohio. It was really a speech that I wanted to educate the educators and the normal citizens about the non-noticeable handicap of being hearing impaired. And I haven't given it lately, so it's a little dated, but I believe it will give you a good personal understanding of the man you are honoring here today. She had 10 perfect fingers and 10 perfect toes, a little red head with a cute pink bow. She was exactly what her father, her other brother, and I have been waiting for 5 years. She was the perfect baby. She slept 20 hours a day. I had to wake her to eat and play. As she got older, she slept till 7:30. Took a nap, played in her playpen or swing, took a nap, played, and went to bed about 6:30 in the evening. What a good baby. She discovered her voice and would make screaming noises whenever awake. She had several illnesses and ear infections quite often. Her ear infections were the type that she hardly ever had a fever, wasn't cranky, or tugged at her ears. It was by luck we found the infections, usually due to some other reason for taking her to the doctor. She had an infection in her left ear that never went away. Finally, her eardrums burst and ruptured and left scar tissue on them. Later, when she was 5, we had tubes inserted, which drained the fluid. One day, driving in the car, I was talking, as I always do, to Dana, and noticed that she was looking at me. And then she looked away. A darling billboard was coming up with zoo animals animated on it. She was 18 months old. At this age, her brother was talking in 3-word sentences. And I know you're not supposed to compare, but you have to have a basis. I pointed and made the noises of each animal and waited for her to laugh and repeat the sounds. To my alarm, she was looking in the opposite direction, making her own noises. I was concerned, but I wasn't worried. I mentioned delays to her pediatrician. He kept saying, "Oh, she has an older brother. He's doing the talking for her. You're an over-concerned mother." My in-laws came for a visit, and living in Florida at this time, we went on vacation to Disney World. We had a wonderful trip. After my in-laws went back to Cincinnati, my mother-in-law phoned, and out of deep concern, she mentioned she noticed Dana might have a hearing problem. Finally, someone away from the daily routine now noticed my suspicions. I knew I had to find out once and for all. So while rocking her one evening, I had my husband slam the door shut to her bedroom. She didn't jump, flinch, or move. She drifted off to sleep in my arms while my concerns sank into reality. What do I do? Where do I go? How am I going to make her understand? And why did this happen? She had 10 perfect fingers and 10 perfect toes. Living in Florida away from my family and only living there 2 years, I didn't have any idea where to go. Her pediatrician was the farthest from a source I would turn to. In fact, once this was confirmed, he apologized and avoided us. Lucky for me, I had a brother in the field of special education in Illinois. I immediately called him and explained our suspicions. He set up the necessary tests and we flew to Illinois at his insistence and expense. We were taken to a soundproof room. The audiologist, a new vocabulary was evolving for us, explained that they would be setting off different sound levels with mechanical animals and lights. I was to have no reaction whatsoever. I was just to watch Dana. They shut the door and went into their room and left us alone. We sat down on the floor and started to play. All of a sudden, a little monkey played cymbals and with little red lights, and they started to move and make noise. Dana continued to play. The monkey was behind her to her left. Next, an elephant's snout started making noise and a light went off. Dana continued to play. The elephant was behind her to her right. By this time, I prayed, please God, let her hear this time. Next, a bear lifted his hat loudly with eyes lit up. She looked up and pointed. The bear was in the front of her. And since she was distracted from play, she heard the monkey in the back. This test went on for a while longer. It seemed for hours. And soon the door opened and we were escorted out. My brother came and took us into a room and went up to the skull. Dana was diagnosed hearing impaired. She was severe to profound with a sensory neural loss. Her loss was mainly at the decibel of the spoken word and tones. She had missed the development of language. I was told that being so young, the test was not as accurate as it will become when she is older. We went through dozens of these tests called audiograms. As she got older, the initial test proved to be very accurate indeed. But she had 10 perfect fingers and 10 perfect toes. My world ended. My dream for Dana was shattered. I felt a deep loss. I felt pity, sadness, sorrow, guilt. All kinds of emotions ran through me. But my brother explained everything I was feeling was normal and expected. He explained there were 5 steps that everyone goes through when finding out a child has a handicap. These feelings are denial, pity, anger, guilt, and loss. My brother's a mover and a shaker. He didn't allow me to wallow in self-pity. There was much to do. We've already lost 2 years. So Dana and I flew back to Florida, armed with names, numbers, and things to do. And after checking with the Florida statutes on teaching, he found out that they didn't have to provide her with an appropriate education because she was only 2. So he said, start off with going to the Speech and Hearing Center. So we drove there 30 miles each way. And finally, he found out that there was a woman that I could contact in the Jacksonville City School, and we could get her into a preschool. It was an early development kind of thing that they hadn't been doing for very long, so we were in the initial beginning of it. But first, before we could do that, she was fitted for hearing aids. And in Florida, audiologists are not licensed to fit hearing aids. You have to go to a hearing aid dealer. So here's this little 2.5-year-old who goes and has a sound test again, and they fit her with a hearing aid, and she had to have mold poured into her ears, and she didn't like that too well either. But my main concern was, how was a 2-year-old going to keep these hearing aids in her ears without pulling them out? They cost $650, and lose them. We went back to the speech and hearing clinic, and the audiologist calibrated the hearing aids to Dana's loss. They told us that she would be a little startled when they turned her on. They flipped the switches on her hearing aids. Her eyes widened as they did it, and someone in the hall blew a whistle. She turned and she looked at me, And then she started clapping her hands. And then we all had tears because she could hear that noise. And it was the first noise that she ever heard. Before the noises, she tugged at her new ears, you know, kind of, what is this in my ear? And then the noises all became, you know, things that she could relate to. Finally, I wanted her to hear my voice, so I turned her in front of me, and I looked at her, and I said, Dana, this is Mama. And she just looked at me, and I said, I love you. After much talk and speech classes were arranged, we finally went into the preschool program, and driving there every day because they didn't have to provide busing for us. And as my brother explained to me, there was nothing that we could do. I formed a support group, and I thought, there's got to be something that we can do. And with my brother's guidance, I got onto the parent advisory board at Florida State University and started some legislation moves to try and get them to educate these children before they reach the age of 5. And they have no language skills, and they're at a really bad deficit. And as a parent, it's very frustrating to deal with that child at home, let alone the teacher having to deal with her. So, Dana was like a sponge. She loved every moment at school. And for all of those sessions, she was learning very rapidly, and we got transferred to Ohio. So I called my brother, and he looked up the Ohio schools that were available in our area, which we live about 20 miles southeast of Columbus, Ohio. And there were 2 schools in Columbus. There were none in our little town of Lancaster. So when we went to look for housing, we checked out those schools. And I didn't know procedure. I didn't know I was supposed to go through my school district. I went ahead and registered her at one of the schools in Columbus and found out that I wasn't supposed to do that. But they eventually, the school system allowed us to do that, but we had to wait 30 days. Before we left Jacksonville, I got ahead of myself. I wanted you to hear a little bit about how frustrating a parent has to deal with a deaf child. Dana was uttering sounds, and we were supposed to respond appropriately. And for anything that she wanted, she had to make a sound. That sound became the word for that utterance. Once that item was learned as that sound for that item, I tried to put names on it. There would be cookies, no cookies, until an utterance was made. No toys until an utterance was made. Sometimes dinner took an hour because she had to speak for things. Sometimes she was too tired and would give up even wanting them. As time went on, great strides were made. Dana uttered 3 words, Mama, Kaka, and Moo. We learned basic sign language to help us communicate with sound. We labeled every item in the house with a word so that when she looked at something, we would say the utterance, and she saw the word, and she saw the item, and she learned really good word association. Dana and I were filmed by the Jacksonville school system to be used in the teaching of the hearing impaired toddler at home, and it was used in Florida and sent to the province in Canada for training. She made great strides. When moving to Lancaster, Ohio in 1981, her vocabulary were 5 actual words. After attending the Alexander Graham Bell School for the Hearing Impaired, within the first 3 months, she was up to 70 words. She was taught lip reading, and to this day has proven that lip reading is pretty useful. When we're in the car going down the street, she can tell me what they're saying in the next car. When we first enrolled her at the A.G. Bell School, I had another quandary come up, so I called my brother. There were 2 different types of educational forms for her. One was called the oral, and one was the total communicative. And as Bobby explained to me, with her having a hearing impairment as profound as she did, there were still possibilities of her potential for her to speak. So put her in the oral program, because there's a hearing world out there, and we want her to speak in that world. You know how mean people can be. So she did. She excelled. She excelled so well that Dana herself wanted to come back to, it was 30 miles one way to her school, and she had to leave every morning at 6. But Dana wanted to come back and live in her hometown so she could play soccer and do the things that normal children do in their neighborhoods. So in 4th grade, we moved her back to Medill. I was so scared, but Bobby assured me that she will be just fine. And believe me, from here on, it's happy. I mean, she is just wonderful. And if it wasn't for him, we would not have the happy success that we've gotten. She became a cheerleader. She also got fixed up with an auditory trainer. She was the first one in our school district to have that through the guidance of my brother and through Quota Club. We were able to, in this speech that I'm giving right now, we were successful in getting money donated to our school system so that we could provide these services for her. She was also, thanks to my brother, given her own tutor because she needed to have someone with her because of her deficit. And so she had a deaf tutor for a while until they started using her in other areas, but then we got that back. It's good to have a brother in special education. She had lots of friends. She was a cheerleader in 5th grade, played softball, basketball, field hockey, and track. She tied the school record for high jump in 9th grade and made the varsity team. Dana was the most improved athlete in 7th grade. She went on to be Central Ohio Coach's Choice for Valuable Player in field hockey, and she played an animated toy in one of our arts and civics plays in Lancaster. And when I wrote this speech, it was her driving. She was getting into driving. So I was a little apprehensive, and I won't go into that. We taught Dana there is nothing that you cannot try or do. The only difference between her friends and her is that she cannot hear as well as they do. So she tries everything she feels that she wants to do. Dana has brought a true meaning to all of our lives, including my brother's. She has made us stop and realize the life around us and not to take anything for granted. She sees things in a different way than anybody else. She sees things for what they really are and not what we hear they may be. She hears a lot with her eyes and sees a lot with her heart. I thank God every day for such a wonderful gift and an opportunity to share my life with such a special young woman. She had 10 perfect fingers and 10 perfect toes and a hearing loss that no one knows. I did this speech around 8 years ago. As an update for you, Dana is now married to a loving husband and has given us a beautiful little copper-topped little boy named Cameron, who hears perfectly. She attended college for 3 years and has taken time off to raise her son, and she works part-time as a bank teller in the drive-through window. She hears very well in there. When her husband finishes his degree, she will finish hers. And with the help of my brother once again, she secured services through the Ohio Rehabilitative Service Worker College. And for hearing aids, her dog chewed them up. He has been there every step of the way for Dana and her years of need. With his professional knowledge and guidance, we had the ability to get the right services for which Dana was entitled to. He taught us to be advocates for our child and to get those entitled services. Please understand, Dana is not the only child that has benefited from my brother's guidance. He had several calls from other family members, all of which were given the same direction, although Dana's situation has been the most significant need of all. If ever anyone has a guardian angel, our family has, and it is alive, and it is well, and it's the form of Robert E. Abbott.
At a special newly formed training program for learning disabilities sponsored by the National Institute for Health. This encounter led Bob moving from Central Illinois up to Waukegan because Mr. Vickers hounded him to come teach up in Waukegan. That day has led to a long professional relationship and personal one with Bill. I now present Bill Vickers, retired special ed director, Waukegan.
My story is that of Bob. His fame was due to his job. The parents lauded him. The students applauded him. The teachers exalted him. But there were times when Bob said, "Take this job and shove it." There were many obstacles at the time that Bob came to Waukegan. Federal laws didn't really exist, and you did almost what you had to do. State bureaucracy was, you know what it is, it's still there today. And of course the local administration said, "We don't have any money." And it was an uphill battle all the way. There were many falls, and a lot of people said it's like the Stations of the Cross for special ed. But let me digress a minute and tell you how it all started 36 years ago. She sort of hinted it both ways, but actually it was in 1966, and I was the president-elect of the Illinois Council for Exceptional Children. And Bob was appointed to a committee by the president, not by me. And I start doing what I always do. I give directions. I told people what I expected of them. And I did that to Bob, where he was supposed to be in charge. He was supposed to be in charge of the program in Toronto, where we were going to meet. Well, I found out later that he went to his mother and said, "I don't like that guy. He's too bossy." He's gotten even too. But anyhow, Bob did prepare a program. And he did a program on a couple of twins Evelyn Harrelson had in Bethesda, Illinois. They were TMH children, and he did the story on them. And I'm going to mention a few names. He played the part of Dr. Spock. Bob Leach was the psychologist. Terry Martin was the nurse. Ella Blanche Stipley was the speech teacher. Fran Garner and Ruth Myers was the teachers, and Evelyn played the mom. Now that skit was so famous and did so well that for years afterwards they said, "Bob, write the skits." And we did. We had a lot more fun at CEC than Feral Monkeys. I got Bob to sign a contract, and yeah, I probably did hound him a little bit. But you know, he's had so many different titles in Waukegan. He was a teacher to start with. Then he became head teacher. Now remember, all of this is for the same money. He didn't get any raises. We didn't have the money. He became a consultant, a supervisor, and then on and up. But there were many ideas that came out of his head that were way before its time. And I'd like to consolidate those achievements, and remember, they are his achievements. And I'm going to call them the 10 Commandments of Education, because he put it all down there just the way it's supposed to be. The first commandment was, "Thou shalt teach the teachers." Let me give you a quote that Bob said a long time ago. Not great, but think about it for a second. You have to get the teachers excited and the school principals to cooperate. And then you have to really work hard to get your teaching across to the kids. And that's really what the game is, isn't it? But he said that a long time ago. In 1967, we were getting ready for a House Bill 1407 in Illinois. That was the mandating bill. And at that time, the teachers were mostly retreads in special ed. They were teachers who fell out of regular education or were asked to go into special education. And so they really weren't trained the way they were supposed to be. And remember, there was no money. So what Bob said, and that was the very first year he was with us, let's get the teachers to an in-service. And he did 6 in-services in the evenings and after school. They were 2 and 3 hours long. He invited the special ed teachers, the regular ed teachers, and all of the parochial school teachers. And that auditorium was always crowded. And they really did begin to understand what this game was all about. I said there was no money. I couldn't ask him to give all those in-services for nothing. Guess what I did? I bought him a suit. That's what he wanted. Bob's a good dresser, you know. Then came House Bill 150, and Bob teamed up with a lady by the name of Marion Dodd, who was from Illinois, Dundee, Illinois, and they went to the legislators and got that passed. And that said that every teacher who goes into teaching in Illinois had to take a course in characteristic. They wanted to get more than that, but that's the best they could do on it. Then comes 94-142, and that was the release of a sleeping giant in Bob Abbott, because all of his ideas blossomed, and then we had money. And we had a lot of money to do in services. Boy, did we use it. All right, well, that's what he did for the teachers. You know, his prime concern, he's always been a person the teachers will look to. But the second commandment is, thou shalt educate early. And Bob said, let's do this, and we call it the WE team, Waukegan Early Entry, where we went out into the community in the park districts, had a group of people come out there and evaluate or screen, really, the teachers. Either the kids got, screen the children, either the children got help within the early program, or we did home intervention. And that was the very first. The third commandment, thou shalt provide a least restrictive environment. Thus was born the West Plan. Now the West Plan is where the teachers evaluated or screened all of the children in special ed. They did it by their need for a level of learning. And each teacher did it for a group of children that had the same level. They did it for mathematics and for language arts. And the thing about it was that some of our kids went out to regular education at that time, and some of the regular education kids came down and did their work with the special ed team. And I'd like to name some of the people who were involved in that. Names don't mean anything to you, but in 20 years from now, when Bob's my age, he'll say, I had a senior moment, and I can't remember who they were. So here they are, Bob. Scott Guzik, Dave Mackey, Julia Corcoran, Jackie Della Valle, Joyce Thomas, Ella Turner, Ed Verinsky, Sharon Samborski, and Claudia Wirtz. They worked very hard to get that program together. The fourth commandment, thou shalt bridge the communication barrier. And there we had many of our children coming in from Mexico and Puerto Rico who couldn't speak our language, and they were being evaluated. Bob brought in a psychologist who spoke Spanish. She began to test them in Spanish, and when they came into special ed, we provided a special education program. Names involved in that, Alejandro Benavides, Ray Rodriguez, Ann Kiefer, Marie Exodus, Rocky Martinez, Claudia Clays, Mike Perry, Ann Sutkus, and Pat Peterson. Maybe some of you know those names because several of them are doctors today in the field of education. The fifth commandment, thou shalt take into account the child's learning style. And here is where the S in SLD means specific, and Bob created that word, and it became a byword in Waukegan. No one got into the program unless they had a diagnostic profile, that they had this entrance and exit criteria, and they had a continuation of options. And that program really put Waukegan on the map, because we used to get every week somebody from another school district would come and say, we want to look at your program. And we even had other agencies, like, for example, Northwestern University came and did a 5-year study on auditory discrimination. The Brugance assessment was used in our program. The Key Math Diagnostic Test did an evaluation. And the Goldstein sent people up to do the social learning curriculum in Waukegan. Then Garnet Company, people that provide USA Today, they came in and they wanted to do a story about different kinds of programs for learning disability people. They did one on Sally Smith with the private school people. They did one with people from Georgia on juvenile security institution. Texas adult version for a learning disability, and our Waukegan WE program is what they did. And they call that whole thing, when they put it together, is I'm Not Stupid. And it's available today if you want to look at it. Very good. The sixth commandment, thou shalt involve and teach the parents. We had a parents group, as Pam said, that without them we wouldn't have got anywhere. We started out inviting the parents to meetings. We gave them copies of the rules and regulations to govern special education. If they didn't understand it, we explained it to them. We gave them a time to ask questions. We talked to them about characteristics. We talked to them about how we're going to go around teaching it. We even rode the bus so the kids were felt safe and secure when they got on the bus and came to the school. We had probably the best group of parents that I could ever imagine to have. They were really very, very supportive. Seventh commandment, thou shalt involve the community for the child's welfare. Bob got a hold of the Park District and started programs for the handicapped children in Waukegan. He used this Junior Women's League to do part of our WE screening. Juvenile Detention Center, we got a teacher placed in that center, and that's no big deal. But you know what? The kids that get out of the center and they try to go back to school, they didn't get back in school. The principals or the counselors would say, you have to wait till next year to come back. You've missed too much school. You can't get in. You know what we did? Gave them an IEP. IEP let them back in right away. Eighth commandment, thou shalt provide suitable material for instruction. We had probably one of the best material centers that any teacher would want to go to. Every day, some teachers would come to that center and say, I need some material for this particular kid at this particular level, and we had it. Bob used a lot of the money from 94-142 to put that stuff in there, and it was used. And we had one of the finest ladies that you'd ever want to meet to run that, Teresa Butkus, and she did a wonderful job of it. Our ninth commandment, thou shalt serve all children. Well, as you know, not all children qualify for special education, but they all need help. So Bob started a diagnostic reading clinic, and it was a very successful thing. In fact, it was the principal started saying, well, instead of having them bring the teachers to us. So eventually we had a reading teacher in every building. Thou, 10th commandment, thou shalt be a leader. And Bob was a leader. The last 3 years that he was in Waukegan, he was the associate superintendent in charge of special services. But during those 3 years, the superintendent was one that would often leave the district. When he left, something was bound to happen. And here are some of the things that happened that Bob had to deal with, and that was with Channel 7, Channel 2, parents. We had one board member's daughter was killed by a swinging gate going into school one morning. A teacher dies of encephalitis. One of the students from the high school stood up and said, I'm gay, and I have AIDS. You know what that did to the high school. And the principal of one high school was replaced in front of the whole staff. And Bob had to deal with that too. That was an embarrassing sort of thing. But anyhow, as it got to the end, Bob was given the privilege of having a school named after him. And it was the West Elementary School, where he spent so many years, became the Robert Abbott Middle School. And to honor Bob, because, you know, I think a lot of him, I had some postcards made. A picture of West School, wow, on it, and a picture of Bob. And on the back, there's a little thing about born Sagittarius in 1936, your age now. Adopted by Leo, who's a lion, and honored by Aries because it's a ram that has the school, R-A, ram. I have some of these if you'd like some afterwards. I gave Bob 1,000, that was his present. Bob retired, we sang to him too. We sang Bye Bye Birdie, and to the tune of Bye Bye Bobby. And you know what he did when he got up after the whole thing was over? He got up and said, I'm a senior now, I want my discounts. Well, Bob had many titles. The kids called him Mr. Rabbit. A lot of the kids in elementary school called him principal, although he never was a principal, but he ran the school, or the principal, really. The teachers called him Mr. A, and then he got the title of Mr. I, CEC. And I'd like to propose another title. He can carry it as long as he wants to, and that is Mr. Educator Exceptional. by the vernacular, that's awesome. Now, you know, Bob he likes to talk, and he would always start off by getting attention. He'd click the lights off and on sometimes, but then he always said, "Now, people." And then he would go into his little talk, and it wasn't always little, though. But listening to Bob is like reading a book with it's a very long book. But what a splendid ending it always had. And I thank you for the privilege of doing it.
It's Bob. And Bob always responds. There's a lady in the audience that's going to give us a little viewpoint of Bob in Illinois, Joyce Meyer, who's been touched by Bob because she grew up with Bob as an employee in the district. And Bob mentored her into ICEC. And Joyce is now the current Federation President of Illinois. And she's going to let us know what Mr. ICEC is really like in Illinois, right?
While many leaders come and go in our organization, Bob Abbott has been a constant leader and contributor to the Illinois Council for Exceptional Children and to the field of special education. The Illinois Federation is alive and thriving today largely due to Bob's constant leadership and involvement. Bob has been instrumental in developing new policies and procedures in ICEC, and he is constantly encouraging new members to become active as officers or to get involved at the federation level or local chapter level on a committee. Bob has a very special way of making everyone feel valued and important. As Pam had mentioned, every ICEC president, present company included, has turned to Bob Abbott when questions arise regarding policy, governance, past practice, or historical matters. Bob's leadership experiences in a variety of organizations, his knowledge from serving as the CEC governance chair, his devotion to the field of special education, and his passion for maintaining our history files have all been of great benefit to our organization. Bob Abbott is definitely an outstanding contributor to special education in Illinois. In 1975, Bob was elected to represent Illinois at the White House Conference for the Handicapped. He has served on numerous Illinois governors' task forces on learning disabilities, and he was named the recipient of the Outstanding Administrator in Illinois Award presented by Michael Bacalus. In Illinois CEC, Bob has served and has held every office in the Federation except that of Secretary. He is, or has been, the Illinois Governor to the CEC Board of Governors. He has served on and has been chairperson of every one of ICEC's standing committees. He is ICEC's permanent historian. Not an executive board meeting goes by that we don't turn to Bob, and he's the only one that has the answer to our question and can provide feedback from why it is and why it was. He also presents at our Ray Graham Memorial Luncheon every fall convention, sharing with us the importance of Ray Graham, who was the father of special education in Illinois. He feels it's very important to share that knowledge and to let our members know how special ed started in Illinois and to keep that in mind. When Illinois first organized, we had 2 regional directors, 2 regions. We had one in Chicago, and then we had Bob Abbott, who covered the entire rest of the state. And Bob made sure, and it was very important to Bob that he visited each of these chapters at least once a year, and that was an awesome task. We are currently reorganizing, and Bob is very actively involved in our Restructure Illinois Ad Hoc Committee at this time, and thank him for his leadership there. Bob has attended CEC conventions for 42 consecutive years, and during that time he has served as a delegate representing Illinois CEC and his local chapters. Is it any wonder why Illinois has named Bob Abbott Mr. ICEC? We are extremely blessed and fortunate to have Bob Abbott in our federation. We love you, we appreciate all you do, and look forward to many more years together. Each of you was presented a little goodie bag, a gift bag when you walked in. If you did not receive one, we can get you one before you leave. Thank you. Congratulations, Bob.
did so well in Illinois, Illinois wanted to show the rest of the states and provinces what they had, and so they sent Bob as Illinois governor to the Board of Governors. Well, everybody on the Board of Governors soon realized Bob's potential, and Bob was elected governor at large for U.S. CEC and participated in the executive committee. Being a past president of CEC, I can tell you that you have to work not only with your members and your board, but it's very, very important that you strike a relationship with staff. They're very important to the organization. CEC wouldn't exist unless we had staff at headquarters. And you had to work with them. And Bob developed a relationship, I know, with many of the staff members, not only one executive committee member to staff, but person to person. And Rusty Welch, who was the assistant executive director, one of the assistant executive directors at the time, became personal friends with Bob as well. And I know Bob always felt that, and I think we benefited in Illinois from his knowledge of CEC from what he learned from staff. So Rusty is going to share with us some of his perceptions of Robert Abbott as an executive committee member from a staff perspective. Rusty is now a financial consultant, but still is very involved and active in CEC.
I've received many, many blessings as a result of this organization, and this certainly is one, to be able to be here and share in the joy that Bob has brought to all of our lives. One of the other blessings that I experienced was to interview with then Executive Director Bill Gear and Assistant Executive Director Carolyn King at the CEC International Convention in 1972 in Washington, D.C., where they invited me to come join the headquarters staff then at Jefferson Plaza in Arlington, Virginia. And I was to perform the role of coordinator of Student CEC. Student CEC having been born in Illinois a few years before. And I was in the department that was then referred to as Unit Development. And we had the responsibility of providing service and support to all of the units of CEC, those being the local chapters, federations and branches, the divisions of CEC, and the governance structure of CEC, the Board of Governors, Executive Committee, and Delegate Assembly. And there I had a chance to work immediately and directly with all of the folks who were working so hard to make special education services a reality for so many children and to support the development of the profession. So it was a tremendous experience for someone like me who came from rural Texas, and when I was leaving Abilene, Texas to go to well, not Reston, but Arlington, Virginia, all my relatives were concerned because I was moving way up north. And that first fall, as I arrived in the fall of '72, I had a little bit of experience with CEC units from my days in Texas, but Bill Gear, the executive director, and Carolyn King wanted to immediately immerse me in an experience that would serve then as really the basis from which I could be a consultant, advisor, resource person to other units throughout the entire organization. And so they wanted me to go and attend and participate in a federation convention, but a federation that would be actually the model of all federations. And guess where they sent me? They sent me to Chicago, to the ICEC convention. That federation was a model at the time as a result of contributions of many, but the president that year was Bob Abbott. And many of you here today were at that very convention, and you took very good care of me, and you taught me well. And Bob, I will always remember and value that experience. It speaks very strongly to the leadership that you had brought to CEC to that point. Bob's career in CEC has been enumerated through several speakers, and certainly following his experience as president, he went on to then be the representative from Illinois to the CEC Board of Governors, and immersed himself in other leadership roles there, the first of which, most significantly, was the Unit Development Committee, what was then called the Unit Development Committee. And I guess I was always impressed, not just, of course, he went on and served in every possible capacity within the governance structure of CEC, the leadership roles and the divisions. But from where I interfaced the organization, I had the opportunity to see hundreds and thousands, really, leaders of CEC make contributions to the organization. And some would come and go, and some would come and not be prepared. Some would come and want their name on what was cut from different cloth, from all of those. Bob came and stayed. Bob came prepared. None other that I can recall was ever more prepared than Bob Abbott. Bob Abbott would receive the materials in advance, as everyone did, but Bob Abbott would go to work with those materials, and he would interview constituents to have constituent input into the process at the international organization. He would receive maybe an agenda of that size, but come with a notebook that size that was all organized and structured along the discussion that was going to follow. And you could always count on Bob to participate very effectively and to always be prepared. But then, more importantly, he participated constructively. More often than not, his position was the majority position, if not initially, certainly by the time he was done. But not always, not always. And some folks, when confronted with a minority position, would develop an attitude of, well, I'm going to take my marbles and go home, and then we'd never see them again. But you would never know from the attitude and the presence that Bob represented that had occurred. And if he ever held a resentment for some of the differences that evolved, you would never know that. So he always participated effectively and constructively. And one of, I guess the other thing within this organization, people leave indelible marks, and he has left many, but always with the presence of humility and a spirit of cooperation. And one of those where he left his mark that many don't know, and I would want to give him credit today. He was chairing the Unit Development Committee, or subcommittee of the Unit Development Committee at the time that the Award for Excellence for CEC units was created. And you would think that would be something that for which there would be no controversy, but any dynamic and effective organization, there's controversy with everything, and certainly there was there. And Bob did his homework again. He surveyed units, he got input, and he held firm that, you see, I guess it speaks to the nature of special educators. Special educators want everyone to be excellent, and to consider that anyone is performing and giving their best is not excellent, is kind of contrary to the special education psyche. And here we had an award where there were specific criteria that were developed and needed to be met in order to be considered excellent. And So one of them, for example, was the unit would have to produce 4 newsletters. And the controversy was, well, what if they do all of these other things and they only do 3 newsletters? Are they not excellent? They haven't met the criteria. We'll give them a certificate with one of the corners cut off. You see. But he constantly enabled folks to come together for a position of positive change. And that strategy, that technique, that presence was reflected in all of the many CEC leadership roles that Bob undertook. He never sought those positions of leadership. He never sought those. He was always brought forward by those who knew his competence and his effectiveness, and he always accepted and he always excelled. And Bob, you've been a joy in my life, and thanks for the contributions, not just to CEC, but to me personally.
And past president, Parthenia.
Well, I'd like to, first of all, ditto everything that everybody has already said, because you have really given an example of my friend over there. Yes, I've known Bob for over 30 years, but I'm only 16, so. And those of you who know me know that I became president of CEC at a very early age. And so I consider Bob one of my mentors because he was only 6 months older than me. So I did meet Bob back in the early 70s on that unit development committee. And if we didn't have some fun with that committee, because Rusty, who just spoke to you, was only a teenager at the time. So we had to be young in order to keep up with Rusty. And so Bob, being a nice dresser, and I like good-looking men who dress nice. So I used to admire him before I became a very good friend of his, only because he was a good dresser. And I mean, he still dresses nice, very expensive clothes. So your brother's a good dresser. But we served together on the Unit Development Committee. And I watched Bob, because Bob had already done all of these beautiful things in Illinois. And I was fascinated at how he could come into the meetings and be prepared, have all these papers lined up, and I was just a little special education teacher who really had not been an administrator and who really didn't know how to do all of these things. But I watched Bob, and I said, I'd like to be like Bob and be able to function somewhat like he was functioning. So then I went on to be the governor from New Jersey, and someone asked me if I'd like to be the governor at large. Bob sat down and talked to me and said, you can do it. So, you do not say no to Bob Abbott. If Bob says you can, you know that you will, because Bob will be right there beside you and he will help you. So thanks to Bob and a lot of other people, I did try it, and I became the governor at large. And Bob was right there with me on the executive committee, and he helped with all the problems. And then the big decision came if I would run for president. Guess who told me I would do it? Yes, my good friend over there, Bob. And sure enough, with the Illinois Federation, and I think it was the Tennessee Federation, I accepted their suggestion. And to my surprise, I became president of CEC. And I remember saying to Bob, now Bob, you got me in this trouble. Don't leave me standing out here by myself. And the Illinois Federation assured me that they would never leave me. And to this day, they never left me. So thanks again, Bob. But Bob, when I was president, and all the committees that I've ever served on with Bob, he has a willingness, as Rusty said, to share what he has done in Illinois. And because Illinois, and a lot of other federations are model federations, but we're just talking about Illinois today. So I don't want the rest of you think I don't think you do good things, because you do. But right now we're focusing on Illinois. But he would share the experience and the expertise that he had with every group. It was not like he wanted to save it for Illinois. He sort of would spread it around. And he always reflected the ground roots perspective, the administrative perspective. Anything that you needed at the time, somehow or another, he reached in his back pocket and he would pull out an experience, an example, or something to help you resolve your problem. And Bob, thanks for that. Because not only did I use that in CEC, I used it as I became an administrator for the State Department and all the other things that I've done. I picked up some of his skills and some of his talents, and I used them in my professional career to do some of the things that I've done. And I think my career professionally is partly a result of what you did on the Unit Development Committee and the Executive Committee, and I'm really indebted to you for that. I remember that back in 1990, when I was president, I raised the issue about what happens to past presidents, because I wanted to know what my role was going to be when I got out of all of this that I was into at that time. Please, relieve me. And so we formed an interest group. Guess who was right there with both feet, both hands, right in the middle? Yes, my friend Bob. And so as a result of that interest group, we formed the Pioneer Division. And that has been over 10 years ago. And Bob is just as active today as he was yesterday, as he was 10 years ago. He has served in many capacities, such as the editor of our newsletter, one of the editors of our newsletter. He is the historian and will always be our historian, as he is with many other organizations. And in 1991, 75th anniversary, because of his interest in history, he came to his colleagues and said, you will help me, we need to do this. And he helped with the development of the CEC, International Center for Scholarship in Education. And Bob, that is a very good idea, and you worked very hard on it, and I want to say thank you in 91 for that. Bob has talents and skills, and his interest in history will help all of us. Because we look at Bob as the heart of a giant, but I think he is a giant. I think that we look at him as he serves as a mentor for the old, as well as us young ones, in the profession of special education. Those of us who are past 16 can remember the Sam Ashcrofts and all of the other people that were the giants in special ed when we were coming along. But I think those of the ones that are in college and so forth now can look back and say, CEC has another giant, and that's Bob Abbott, because he really believes in improving the quality of life for our special needs students, and he means that he's going to do that through CEC membership, and the colleagues, those of us that are here, benefit from Bob's expertise. And Bob, we want to thank you for that. He has the assistance of all of us to increase the opportunities for our special needs. Bob is truly one of my very special friends, next to Joe Thompson. I want to put that first. And I have to digress right here a little bit. I would say for the past 20 years, maybe a little longer than that, I always know when Christmas is coming. I'm sorry, the holiday season is coming. You have to be politically correct. You can't say Christmas anymore. The holiday season is coming because I get my first Christmas card. And guess who it's from? Bob. I think maybe once or twice his little friend over here beat him, so Bob had to come in second. But I look forward to receiving that Christmas card because I know I'm not forgotten. And so Bob, please don't stop sending me my cards this year, so you knew that I needed it. So I'd like to say, Bob, thank you for allowing me as a colleague to be part of your life. But most of all, thank you for being my friend and helping me to develop into the individual that I hope that I illustrate to people that I am. I love CEC, but I think you may even love it more than I do. So again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your life as a colleague and a friend.
Isn't here. Bob, we need another session. Could you possibly do one? Bob, I took this chairmanship, and I really don't know what to do. Bob, if I do this, would you help me? Mr. Abbott, we have this problem, and you're the only one that's going to be able to come in and help us. That's just not CEC. That's organizations that Bob belongs to. He's participated in so many, and people call on him all the time to be pitch hit speakers, helpers, advisors. Bob always says, as you've heard, yes.
Enjoy having a card with ditto marks on it, because I really agree with everything everyone has said. But at the same time, I feel a very strong responsibility because I do come from a little different perspective in Bob's life, so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I grew up as a general ed teacher, they would say now, and with some help from Bill Cruikshank at Syracuse University, got very interested in what in those days were minimally brain damaged youngsters and ultimately specific learning disabilities teaching. So I did some teaching in that area, and I was a brand new doctoral graduate in it was early 70s when I got into Illinois to do some work at Northern Illinois University. And that really, after some involvement with CEC up to that point, became my first time to work directly with and get to know Bob a little bit. As a new faculty member, I was very convinced that the community and the university should work together. So we worked on internship placements, we worked on workshops and continuing ed and graduate programs off campus. And Waukegan became a very popular focus for a lot of that activity. And that's really where I first began to find out a little bit about so many of Bob's skills. And then I thought to myself, well, I need to think of exactly how to describe him. And I had a terrible time narrowing down some descriptors, but I do want to mention some that I think are particularly important. I learned several things from him. Because he was in Illinois, I learned a lot about Illinois' idiosyncrasies. This is probably not the right group to say that to. But they were different than Maryland and Virginia, where I came from. So he helped me learn a lot about how to get around, who to talk to, who not to talk to, who to talk to softly, those kinds of things. I think the commitment to those with disabilities is the first thing I just have to mention. And Linda, you certainly were one of the things that he has used in a very professional way to constantly relate the real world to some of the policy and theoretical questions that people have. And I think that's a very useful thing that not many people can do so as well as he does. Secondly, he certainly has knowledge. And I don't need to say much more except it just covers a breadth of areas that are just amazing, I think, still at this point for me. Encourages those who possess talents and skills to use them. And I guess I just have to say that now with this Pioneers Division presidency, he was one of the first ones to jump in and say, don't worry, you can do it. I'm still counting on him to prove that, but he certainly did do that. He's conscientious and shows what I call endurance. You give him a task and you know it's going to get done, and it's going to get done on time in a very well done, thorough way. And you just can't find many people these days to count on that way. He has patience and what I call quiet persistence. I can't count the time. Someone said, I think it was Bill said, now listen, there are so many times in other organizations that I'll tell you a little bit about, where what he does is sit and listen to the discussion and patiently waits it out, and then at the right time can say, it appears to me that what we need to do is this. Or I can remember one time in the Division for Learning Disabilities, we were discussing some new idea that someone had decided we should try. And we had all kinds of opinions, how to do it, should we do it, when should we do it? And so Bob listened patiently and said something like, you realize, don't you, that in order to do this, we would have to change Article 6, Item 72 of the bylaws and policies. And then people said, hey, by golly, I hadn't even thought about that. So he would wait until the right time, and then he'd bring us back to ground and make sure that we paid attention to the things we needed to pay attention to. And then shocked, the last time we were in the same room, I think he said, I'm thinking about getting a computer. And I thought, see, now don't try to contact him by email. Yeah, but we are going to get into that point eventually. And he doesn't let it interfere. He writes things by hand, gets everything done, but it is still the pen and quill. help with, and that is just learning disabilities through two different organizations. In the Learning Disabilities Association, which is a parent group oriented particularly for that area, he has been very active. I think when it's mentioned that he has been on the professional advisory board there, the board of directors. He's involved in the governance of the organization. That's not new. That's also important. In the Learning Disabilities Association, he brought all of his skills to bear in 2 executive director searches. And I was so surprised because after the first one, we got to the second time. The first one he chaired, the second he was on the committee. The first thing he could do is come up with some of the materials that had been used as the first level. So we kind of didn't have to start at ground zero. We were able to benefit from his background, and he was able to help us with that. He serves as parliamentarian in more situations than many of us think we wanted to see in Learning Disabilities Association. He can show us how to do things, how to facilitate meetings. When some difficult circumstances come up, he lets everybody, again, tell their point of view, why they think it should be this, that, and it should be that way. Then he goes to the exact quote in the Roberts Rules and says, this is how it needs to be. Forget any of those other ideas that don't fit this. So it's very helpful in utilizing his political contacts to help LDA. So the state level contacts that he has, for example, can give us some help in getting some national advocacy work done. And he's always willing to do that. He seems to have, I don't know what kind of clock he has. He must have a 36-hour day on his watch because he gets more done than anyone else I know. He brings his energy and concerns to the board and to the committees. And you have to envision a board of directors meeting at LDA. We have about 25 people sitting around a big table, some of whom don't know why they're there. Others are very enthusiastic about their idea, and that's why they're there. And others that are trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Bob waits until the last appropriate desk to remind him that Route 66 is where he'd like to be most of his life. So I think I was in relief. So you'll have that, and I respect you a great deal and wish you the best. You are older than I am.
Okay. Talk about leaving indelible marks and being a nice dresser. I've been writing comics. And I'll tell you what, the most indelible mark ever left to me that you'll always remember as long as I live, up to the age of 110, is seeing Bob walking across the Hilton lobby in a bright yellow lemon suit. Which is redhead. No one's redhead, no one's what? 1973, Bob has been one of my longest friends since meals, speakers, and Illinois. Unfortunately, his other person has been anymore. But knowing Bob, one of the most fearful things I always dread when I see him coming to me in conferences. Oh, good, you're here. Talk about, Bob, what are we going to do? Because he says, you know, somebody in the panel did not show up. Really? What's the panel about? Oh, you can do it. He did it again just this last time for LDA. I received this letter that says, oh, we dread to cancel one of the final discussions, and could you and Shirley and Elisa please set up the
We are going to participate in a game show called The Beautiful Province. Our contestants for today are Jean-Bienne and Claudine.
Taking an update course on computer, and where I live in my clubhouse, I do have access to a computer, and I do use it, but I choose to travel instead of being addicted to email and the fax machine. So I want to say publicly that while it might appear that I've given to CEC, I've really gotten more from CEC than I have given. And and what I have gotten will be forever with me, and that's and the extended family. Some of you I have known for such a long time. I've watched your children. I watched Sammy grow up, get married, become a parent. And there's just so many wonderful things that you become a part of a family. I hope that will always be true in CEC. I carry with me a quote that I think represents hopefully my relationship with many of those who spoke today and many of you in the room who are dear friends and very precious to me. And it was by Eleanor Roosevelt. I liked her. You know, she said, if you got an itch, scratch. But this is my favorite quote from her. Many people will walk in and out of your life, but only true friends leave footprints on your heart. Obviously, every one of these people today who presented are very near and dear to me, and I thank all of you. I'd like to speak to each of you personally and tell you how much you have enriched my life and how appreciative I am to all of you in our relationships over the years, but that would take the rest of the day. I do want to say to you that it was very hard for me to sit there this morning because I really would prefer to be giving the recognition to other people. That's the way I was brought up by my mother and father. We believe in recognizing and giving. My model was my dear grandmother, who was involved in everything. Some thought she was nosy, but I saw her as someone who was committed to sharing her thoughts and experiences in the greater community. Obviously, my baby sister, who was our gift 15 years on Christmas Day to our family, was very near and dear. She was the final project of our father. Recently, our father referred to all of us as projects. I was project number 2. She was project number 5. And recently, my friend Mr. Vickers and I, he talked me into going to see the movie The Rookie. And while it was a wonderful show, I cried during all the first parts because, you see, it was very similar to the beginning of my own father. The career, since he was scouted from a small town and played semi-professional baseball and then played for the St. Louis Browns, and life was not the way it is today in professional baseball, and chose to give up his career because my oldest sister was on the horizon, and his parents, being very devout Christians, didn't think that was the appropriate thing. And throughout his life, he reminded my mother that she was his choice and not his career. But I to say to you that my recently Linda, my mother, died, and my brothers and sisters decided that I would give the eulogy in behalf of the family. And that was a joyful thing for me to do, because we should be rejoicing in the contributions and the memories and the things that people give. And my mother and father gave so much to us. And I see my mother and my father reflected in my sisters and my brothers and my nieces, my nephews, and all of my great nieces and nephews. And I have to say that in Waukegan, I didn't want to go there. It's true, I did not want to go to Waukegan. But I am very appreciative to Waukegan Public Schools. For in the 60s, they made a commitment to support kids with disabilities, and they didn't wait until the state mandated services. We had early childhood programs in the late 60s, and we had bilingual special ed, and everything we did, they supported. And in your life, when you get to the point of retirement, my view is, yes, there are things, your priorities change. You don't have to get up at 5:30 and go to bed at midnight wondering if tomorrow's bringing another rash of grant writing regulations and all kinds of things. But I also believe in life that we should give back and thank God for all of the blessings that we have experienced. and you choose to do what you want to choose to do in retirement. And I choose to remain committed to all of the things that I believe in. There are many victories we have won, but there are many battles to be fought yet. And one of the blessings of retirement is to be able to say, hey, Linda, I disagree with you, you know, and not worry about retribution, a monitoring compliance or some list, as well as obviously one of the obvious joys of retirement and being a senior citizen, Pat, is to call and say, I want the senior citizen discount. So in closing, I want to say to you, as I look out over the room, you're all very, very special. You all represent a significant part of my life, and I am flattered by your presence today, and most appreciative, and feel that I am no more deserving of this recognition than any of you would be. So thank you very much.
We have a memory book here and some cards if some of you haven't had a chance to sign and would like to leave Bob another message. We'd like to do that. And as all Broadway shows have, we have a finale, okay? It's put on by J&M Productions, okay? Jim and Judy Meeks, and Bevan and Lonnie Jones.
And it is a true hero is measured by the strength of his heart. We want to thank you for the strength that you have given your family, everyone in this room, but most importantly, all exceptional children. And our closing is a song in tribute to you. We are going to sing because we know that Bob taught us it's important to model. So we're going to model the song, and then we're going to ask all of you to sing.
He comes from Illinois with history on his knee. He works all day, he works all night for kids with special needs. He fought the fight, he fights the fight, Bob Abbott, if you please. Oh, Bob Abbott, Mr. CEC. He comes from Illinois with history on his knee. The Robert Abbott Middle School is in his great honor. DLD CEC of his youngest farmer. Oh, Bob Abbott, Mr. CEC. He comes from Illinois with history on his knee. Advocate and presenter and mentor to us all. We always do rely on him, for he's the one to call. Oh, Bob Abbott, Mr. CEC. He comes from Illinois with history on his knee. Now we'll all do it. Everybody, you ready?
1, 2, 3.
Oh, Bob Abbott, Mr. CEC. He comes from Illinois with history on his knee. He works all day, he works all night for kids with special needs. He fought the fight, he fights the fight, Bob Abbott, if you please. Oh, Bob Abbott, Mr. CEC. He comes from Illinois with history on his knee. The Robert Abbott Middle School is in his great honor. DLD CEC of his youngest honor. Oh, Bob Abbott, Mr. CEC. He comes from Illinois with history on his knee. Advocate and presenter and a mentor to us all. We always do rely on him, for he's the one to call. Oh, Bob Abbott, Mr. CEC. He comes from Illinois with history on his knee.
That's for the history. You didn't have